The cameras hadn't even settled before the atmosphere thickened with electricity. Every breath carried weight. Every glance suggested eruption. For weeks, quiet chatter had been building. Subtle hints, side conversations, suspicion hanging in the air like fog. And when Rasheeda finally sat across from Yandy, everyone watching understood. This wasn't going to be calm. This was collision. The silence before the first word was unbearable. Even the scrape of a chair sounded like glass breaking. People leaned in, waiting for detonation. Rasheeda struck first, her voice sharp, her tone slicing through the silence. She accused Yandy of speaking recklessly about her marriage, her household, her family. Her words landed like blades. Yandy didn't flinch, not even for a second. She tilted her chin, smirk curling, eyes steady. Her reply dripped with venom. She claimed Rasheeda was obsessed, unable to stop circling her name. She accused her of dragging her into the spotlight week after week. It wasn't just conversation. It was declaration. A small spark over a podcast turned instantly savage. Secrets poured out. Old grudges surfaced. The tension burst open, racing like fire across dry fields. Marriage documents. DNA rumors. Whispers about children. Topics too personal to mention in public were suddenly out in the open. The weight in the room was unbearable. Each pause felt like thunder rolling in. Neither one backed away. Neither even blinked. This wasn't exchange. This was battle. The air dared someone to interrupt, to break the standoff, to ignite the flames completely. Rasheeda's arms folded across her chest. Her eyes narrowed, fixed on Yandy like steel. This wasn't performance, it was conviction. For Rasheeda, the issue wasn't just podcasts or interviews. It wasn't gossip or online chatter. This had become personal. She believed Yandy had been fueling drama deliberately, spreading stories, stirring chaos. She didn't want explanation. She wanted accountability, but Yandy had no intention of giving it. She leaned back, smile etched on her face. Her words cut sharper than her smirk. She insisted nothing she said was fabricated. She only repeated truths others had already hinted at. If the public was already asking questions, she claimed she simply responded. Her defense poured fuel onto the fire. The balance in the room shifted. Voices rose. The restraint vanished. Viewers at home could already sense it. This argument wasn't going to cool. It was going to explode. Rasheeda's tone sharpened. She accused Yandy of deflecting, of using her name as cover for her own problems. She declared that the lies, the gossip, the whispers, all of it, had finally caught up. Her voice shook, not with weakness, but with rage restrained for too long. Yandy's clapback was immediate. She snapped that Rasheeda was the one fixated, the one feeding blogs, tossing sparks into gasoline, desperate to stay relevant. The words landed heavy. For a brief moment, silence returned. But it was different this time. A silence that screamed louder than shouting. Those close by shifted uncomfortably. They knew this wasn't television fluff. This wasn't scripted drama. This was raw. This was layered. This was war. Truth and exaggeration blurred into one. Each accusation bled into the next. Every statement sounded final, irreversible. And then realization spread across the room. What started as whispers had turned into wildfire. 2 women. 2 reputations. 2 families. Everything colliding beneath the glare of cameras. And as this opening tension unfolded, one fact became impossible to ignore. Nothing about this night would fade. This wasn't just reality TV. This was combat, and the opening shots had already been fired. The moment the first accusations left Rasheeda's lips, the spark ignited. Her words weren't casual. They were sharp, direct, aimed to wound. She declared Yandy had been meddling in her personal life for far too long, talking about her marriage, dissecting her choices, throwing careless comments into the public arena. Yandy's laugh cut the tension like broken glass. A cold, hollow laugh that didn't match the anger brewing in her eyes. She shot back instantly, claiming Rasheeda was exaggerating, twisting things, fabricating drama to look like a victim. Her voice dripped with scorn as she asked, Why do you even care what I say if your house is really in order? The room shifted. Those words landed with weight. Rasheeda didn't hesitate. She snapped back, calling Yandy desperate for attention, accusing her of clinging to any spotlight she could find. Her voice grew louder, each word like a strike, each sentence layered with frustration that had been bottled for years. Yandy's smirk hardened. Her reply came steady, calculated but filled with venom. She claimed Rasheeda couldn't stand seeing her shine, that the real problem wasn't gossip, it was jealousy. She accused Rasheeda of lurking, watching, obsessing over her every move. Desperate to find fault, the exchange grew harsher, shade turned into open fire. Words became weapons. Rasheeda pressed forward. She accused Yandy of manufacturing storylines just to stay relevant, of using other people's names to keep her own alive. She asked why Yandy never let her family speak for themselves, why she always positioned herself as the savior while tearing others down. The line hit hard, but Yandy wasn't rattled. Her voice rose, biting back with accusations of hypocrisy. She shouted that Rasheeda had spent years sweeping her own scandals under the rug, hiding problems while pretending her life was perfect. She claimed Rasheeda's image was a facade, carefully polished while cracks beneath the surface grew wider every year. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The words stung because they rang too close to whispers already circulating outside. Rasheeda leaned forward, fury in her eyes. She reminded Yandy that, unlike her, she didn't have to fabricate drama to stay on screens. She built businesses. She built stability. She didn't rely on manufactured chaos. Every syllable was packed with defiance. Yandy shot back with venom, dismissing Rasheeda's accomplishments as hollow trophies. She claimed the businesses were props, distractions from the real dysfunction at home. She insisted that behind the storefronts and polished images was a reality Rasheeda never wanted exposed. The energy in the room burned hotter. Voices overlapped. Accusations collided. For a moment, it felt like no one was listening anymore. They weren't exchanging words, they were exchanging blows. Each line cut deeper, each reply harsher than the one before. Rasheeda's tone cracked, but not with weakness, with rage. She said Yandy thrived on inserting herself into conflicts that weren't hers, stirring fires she never had to put out. She called her manipulative. She called her selfish, and then the sharpest line yet. You don't just ruin friendships, you destroy families. The words froze the room. The silence afterward was deafening. Yandy's eyes narrowed, her smirk gone. Her voice trembled with fury as she shot back. She accused Rasheeda of projecting, of blaming others for pain she created herself. She reminded her that if her family was breaking, it wasn't because of outside voices. It was because of secrets inside her own house. The escalation was now unstoppable. Every word felt like a hammer, every retort like a counterstrike. The rhythm of their exchange no longer resembled an argument. It sounded like battle drums. Yandy accused Rasheeda of hiding truth from the public while pretending to be untouchable. Rasheeda countered by calling Yandy a parasite, living off the chaos she engineered, the crowd whispered. The cameras caught every twitch, every grimace, every flare of anger. The energy was suffocating. Rasheeda's hands tightened as her words cut sharper. She declared she was done being silent, done letting Yandy play puppeteer with her name. She wouldn't allow her narrative to be twisted anymore, but Yandy met her fire with equal heat. She refused to yield. She claimed Rasheeda could try to silence her all she wanted, but the truth would always seep through. She insisted the world already saw through the act, and all Rasheeda was doing was delaying the inevitable. Their voices clashed like steel. Neither woman blinked. Neither stepped back. The first exchange was no longer just talk. It was war, and the war had only begun. The shouting match didn't cool. It only evolved into something sharper, darker, and far more personal. What started as accusations over reckless comments now twisted into claims of obsession. Rasheeda leaned in, her voice brimming with fury. She told Yandy she couldn't stop mentioning her name, couldn't resist using her life as a storyline, couldn't go a month without dragging her into headlines. "You don't live your life," she snapped. "You live mine." The words hit like a hammer. Yandy didn't falter. She fired back, her tone dripping with mockery. She accused Rasheeda of being paranoid, of thinking the world revolved around her. She sneered that nobody was checking for her like she believed, and if blogs kept publishing her name, it was because she handed them content herself. The crowd gasped. The air grew heavier. Rasheeda's jaw tightened. She claimed Yandy had relationships with bloggers, feeding them snippets, planting stories designed to paint her in chaos. She swore that every time she scrolled, her family was being dissected, her marriage being mocked, and her private pain turned into public entertainment. Her voice shook with anger. But beneath the rage was something else: hurt. Yandy clapped back fast. She called Rasheeda delusional, insisting she had no control over blogs. She claimed the only reason stories spread was because people found Rasheeda's mess entertaining. She mocked her for blaming others instead of owning her reality. The tension grew unbearable. Each line stung more than the last. Rasheeda's eyes narrowed. She shouted that Yandy thrived on toxicity, always inserting herself, always feeding narratives, always working behind the scenes like a puppet master. She swore Yandy wanted her downfall. Yandy's face hardened. She spat that Rasheeda needed to stop playing victim. She reminded her that gossip sites didn't invent her scandals. They exposed them. And if the world laughed, it was because the cracks were already visible. The crowd murmured. Shock rippled through the air. Then came the dagger. Rasheeda accused Yandy of being obsessed, not with her mistakes, but with her life, with her stability, with her family. She said Yandy couldn't stand watching her succeed, couldn't stand seeing her stay married, couldn't stand her longevity. "You want what I have," Rasheeda declared, "but you'll never have it." The words exploded like dynamite. Yandy's expression shifted from smirk to fury. She said Rasheeda was insecure, clinging to a marriage full of fractures while pretending it was perfect. She accused her of using family as a shield while ignoring the truth simmering underneath. Her voice cut sharp as glass. "You're not inspiration. You're denial dressed up as success." The atmosphere trembled with tension. Rasheeda fought back instantly. She reminded Yandy that she had no authority to judge her marriage when her own house was far from spotless. She said Yandy hid her own flaws behind smoke and mirrors, all while tearing down others for entertainment. The exchange turned vicious. Every accusation revealed another layer of venom. Rasheeda swore Yandy fueled headlines deliberately. Yandy swore Rasheeda's scandals needed no help going viral. Rasheeda called Yandy manipulative. Yandy branded Rasheeda envious. Each line was a weapon. Each word a bullet. The debate wasn't about who was right anymore. It was about destruction. Rasheeda declared she was tired of her name being dragged into clickbait, tired of her children's lives being dissected, tired of watching her marriage turned into gossip fodder. She accused Yandy of orchestrating the storm. Yandy's rebuttal came fast, her tone savage. She said she never needed Rasheeda's name to stay relevant, that her own presence commanded attention, that the only reason Rasheeda kept accusing her was because she wanted to believe someone else was responsible for the chaos in her life. The words were daggers. Rasheeda's fury reached a breaking point. She shouted that Yandy wanted her downfall so badly she couldn't see straight, that she built her brand on destruction, that she fed drama because peace didn't suit her. Her voice cracked with emotion. Yandy leaned forward, eyes blazing. She shot back that she wasn't obsessed, she was exposing. And if Rasheeda couldn't handle the truth, that was her burden to bear. The clash was relentless. Each sentence grew louder, sharper, deadlier. Rasheeda insisted she was done letting her story be manipulated by outside voices. Yandy mocked her for thinking she could silence gossip when gossip was already the language of their world. It was obsession versus denial, manipulation versus exposure, and neither woman gave ground. Every headline they argued about seemed to manifest in real time. Every blog post they mentioned suddenly felt like a prophecy. By the end of the exchange, the room wasn't just tense, it was suffocating. Every breath carried the weight of years of bitterness. Every glance promised another explosion. And as voices finally dropped to a simmer, one truth was clear. The battle wasn't about a blog. It wasn't about a headline. It was about obsession, about envy, about who truly controlled the narrative, and neither Rasheeda nor Yandy was ready to surrender. This was escalation. This was fire, and it was only getting started. The tone shifted from bitter accusations to something far more lethal. This wasn't about gossip anymore. This was about home, about children, about the most fragile pieces of a person's life. Rasheeda's voice dropped lower, her words sharp but steady. She accused Yandy of daring to cross a sacred line. She claimed Yandy dragged her household into public debate, questioning the strength of her marriage, disrespecting the vows she fought to protect. Her voice quivered with rage. "You don't mention my husband. You don't mention my children. You don't get to use my family for your storyline." The silence afterward was suffocating. Yandy leaned forward, her tone cutting with deliberate precision. She said Rasheeda couldn't keep pretending her marriage papers weren't already in circulation, that the rumors hadn't been whispered for years. She alleged that the cracks in her union weren't manufactured, they were documented. Gasps echoed as her words hung heavy in the air. Rasheeda's face hardened. She shot back that Yandy had no business speaking on her household when her own wasn't flawless. She spat that Yandy hid behind carefully staged moments, shielding the real dysfunction that bubbled inside her walls. The insults grew heavier, the blows more personal. Yandy smirked, but her voice cut like a blade. She accused Rasheeda of clinging to a broken marriage only to maintain an image, claiming she stayed not for love, but for survival. She questioned whether loyalty meant anything when the foundation had already been fractured. Rasheeda's fury boiled over. Her words came like fire, trembling but fierce. She said Yandy had no right to comment on her decisions, no right to weaponize her marriage papers, no right to drag her children into a spectacle. "This is my family," she declared. "Not a prop for your entertainment." But Yandy didn't step back. She pressed forward, voice rising, tone relentless. She said Rasheeda's children already lived under the shadow of public scandal because of choices Rasheeda herself had made. She claimed the blogs didn't invent stories. They reflected what was visible to everyone. The weight of her words was devastating. Rasheeda's voice cracked, but the fire inside remained unbroken. She told Yandy that dragging children into conflict was beyond cruelty. It was unforgivable. She said Yandy crossed a line that could never be undone. Yandy's eyes narrowed, her tone ice-cold. She argued that Rasheeda had paraded her family on camera for years, profiting from storylines centered on private pain. She claimed she wasn't the one exploiting them, Rasheeda was. The audience gasped at the venom. Rasheeda's response was immediate, her fury undeniable. She snapped that Yandy's accusations were hollow, rooted in envy. She insisted that her children would never be pawns, never tools, never sacrificed for fame. Her voice rang with defiance. But Yandy came back sharper, harder, more vicious. She said Rasheeda's family cracks had been visible long before she mentioned them, that what she exposed was already out in the open, whispered in every corner of the industry. The argument spiraled into raw territory. Rasheeda accused Yandy of being heartless, of disrespecting bonds that should remain untouchable. She called her cold, calculated, obsessed with dismantling the things she could never build herself. Yandy hit back with a final, brutal strike. She said Rasheeda's marriage was a contract, not a commitment. A performance, not a partnership. A facade polished for cameras but crumbling in reality. The words landed like a bomb. For a moment, silence reigned, heavy, absolute, the kind of silence that chills the skin. Rasheeda inhaled sharply, her eyes glistening with fury. Her reply cut deep. She declared that unlike Yandy, she had weathered storms, raised her children with strength, and fought for love even when it hurt. She said Yandy wouldn't understand because she never carried that kind of weight. Her voice shook, but her conviction did not. Yandy's laugh returned, cold, mocking, hollow. She accused Rasheeda of rewriting her pain into a fairy tale, convincing herself endurance meant victory. She claimed the truth was simple. Rasheeda stayed because leaving meant admitting failure. The room felt like it could collapse under the weight of the words. Every glance, every expression, carried fire. Every sentence struck like lightning. The fight was no longer about scandals, no longer about blogs, no longer about shade. This was blood deep. This was about pride, about loyalty, about the legacy of family. Rasheeda shouted that Yandy would never comprehend sacrifice, that she thrived on other people's ruin because she had no foundation of her own. She swore her children would never be tainted by the poison Yandy brought into the room. Her voice broke, but her strength did not. Yandy's reply was lethal. She said the poison was already there, long before she spoke. She insisted the truth didn't come from her lips. It came from the cracks Rasheeda tried to hide. The exchange seared like fire against steel. Rasheeda swore she would protect her family with everything she had. That no rumor, no blog, no bitter rival could dismantle the foundation she built. She shouted that Yandy's obsession would never destroy what love had sustained. But Yandy stood her ground, eyes locked, voice steady. She said love without honesty was nothing, that families built on denial were already doomed. Every sentence felt like the strike of a gavel, every word like a verdict. By the time their voices finally faltered, the air was thick with smoke no one could clear. Marriage papers, children, loyalty, betrayal. Every sacred bond had been dragged into the battlefield, and as the echoes faded, one chilling truth lingered. This wasn't just an argument anymore. This was devastation. This was war at its most personal, and there was no way back from here. The conversation took a darker turn. The words no longer circled around vague tension. They landed on scandals. Scandals with names, faces, and consequences. Yandy's voice dropped, sharp and deliberate. She mentioned Kirk, she invoked Jasmine, she whispered about DNA tests that had never truly been silenced. Her tone was cold, calculated, like she knew exactly where to strike. The crowd reacted instantly. A wave of shock rippled through the air. Rasheeda's eyes flared. She demanded Yandy keep Kirk's name out of her mouth. She insisted that the Jasmine chapter was closed, that her family had survived it, that outsiders had no right to weaponize it again. But Yandy wasn't done. She accused Rasheeda of pretending strength while living in denial. She said the DNA whispers were still alive, echoing through blogs, still fueling conversations in corners Rasheeda couldn't control. Her words hit like thunder. Rasheeda's voice trembled with fury. She shouted that DNA results were old history, settled truth, not a playground for rivals to exploit. She said Yandy's obsession with dragging up past pain revealed desperation, not power. But Yandy smirked, her tone chilling. She said everyone knew how shaky the narrative had been, that the papers might say one thing, but the whispers told another. She claimed doubt was a shadow Rasheeda would never escape. The air grew heavier. Rasheeda struck back. She accused Yandy of hiding behind gossip because she had no real ammunition. She said Yandy relied on recycled rumors instead of confronting her own financial mess, her own marital cracks, her own reputation teetering on the edge. The words sliced like glass. Yandy's reply was venomous. She said Rasheeda's finances weren't pristine either. She accused her of covering debt with designer labels, of dressing instability in glitter. She said cameras didn't show overdue payments, failed ventures, or the cost of maintaining appearances. The crowd gasped. Rasheeda's response was instant. She snapped that her businesses were thriving, that her boutiques were stable, that she stood as proof of resilience. She declared Yandy could never match the empire she built through grit and perseverance. But Yandy leaned in closer, her words dripping with scorn. She said empires built on shaky foundations eventually crumble. She hinted that investors had pulled back, that sales weren't as strong, that Rasheeda's empire was a house of cards waiting to collapse. The tension was electric. Rasheeda spat back that Yandy thrived on falsehoods, feeding poison to blogs and letting outsiders carry her narrative. She accused her of planting stories, of manipulating headlines, of living for scandal instead of substance. Yandy's response cut to the bone. She said the blogs didn't create fire, they followed the smoke. She insisted the rumors existed because Rasheeda left openings, because cracks were visible to anyone willing to look. The argument spiraled deeper. Rasheeda turned the spotlight back. She said Yandy's financial picture was no better, maybe worse. She claimed whispers of unpaid staff, management disputes, broken contracts. She accused Yandy of presenting herself as a mogul while secretly drowning in liabilities. Her tone dripped with disdain. Yandy barked out a cold laugh. She said Rasheeda could never comprehend her world, her deals, her influence. She claimed the money she moved, the partnerships she secured, the reach she commanded, were beyond Rasheeda's grasp. But Rasheeda wasn't finished. She attacked Yandy's credibility. She claimed no one in the industry truly trusted her, that her name was linked with drama more than deals, that her so-called influence was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. The blows grew relentless. Yandy countered with precision. She accused Rasheeda of surviving scandals only because people pitied her. She said the sympathy card had been her currency, her shield, the only reason she hadn't been buried by Kirk's mistakes. The words were lethal. Rasheeda roared back. She declared she survived not by sympathy but by strength. She said she faced betrayal head-on, rebuilt her marriage brick by brick, raised her children with dignity, and created success despite the chaos. Her voice thundered with conviction, but Yandy was merciless. She accused Rasheeda of lying to herself, of calling survival strength when it was really fear. She said Rasheeda clung to her marriage because letting go meant losing everything: status, storyline, empire. The silence after her words was suffocating. Rasheeda's chest heaved as she answered. She said Yandy's bitterness was obvious, that her obsession revealed envy. She swore her life, messy as it was, still stood taller than anything Yandy had managed to build. Her declaration echoed. Yandy's smile vanished. Her next words were icy. She said envy wasn't the truth. The truth was exposure. And exposure was what Rasheeda feared most. She spoke of headlines that refused to die. About Jasmine. About Kirk. About DNA whispers. About money questions that never fully disappeared. She said every time Rasheeda tried to bury them, they clawed back to the surface. The crowd leaned in, breathless. Rasheeda shouted that headlines were temporary, that only family endured. She said Yandy didn't understand loyalty, didn't understand endurance, didn't understand rebuilding. Her voice cracked but did not break. Yandy's reply was final. She said endurance without truth was weakness, not strength. That rebuilding without honesty was deception, not triumph. That loyalty without respect was nothing. Every word hit like a gavel. The room pulsed with raw energy. The air was thick, charged, unyielding. This was no longer about petty shade. This was about scandals that scarred reputations, money that dictated survival, DNA whispers that fractured trust, and careers hanging by threads. By the end, the battlefield was littered with names, receipts, and scars too deep to ignore. Kirk, Jasmine, DNA, finances, every secret dragged into the light. And as the echoes faded, one terrifying truth remained. Neither of them would ever walk away unscathed. The atmosphere in the room shifted from heavy to suffocating. Every micro-expression told a story. Every twitch carried meaning. The cameras zoomed in, capturing tension no words could describe. Yandy's jaw tightened, the faint clench of teeth betraying her calm exterior. Rasheeda's nostrils flared, the smallest detail revealing the storm beneath her composed stare. These weren't grand gestures. These were flickers, barely visible, yet impossible to ignore. A single raised eyebrow, a twitch at the corner of a mouth, a blink held too long. Each reaction painted a portrait of fury, control and restraint balanced on the edge of collapse. Production noticed immediately. The crew leaned forward. Camera operators adjusted their focus, desperate not to miss a single nuance. Producers exchanged anxious glances, debating whether to step in or let history unfold. Friends seated nearby shifted uncomfortably. One reached out, hand hovering as if to intervene, but pulled back instantly. Knowing even the smallest movement could ignite an explosion, the room became a battlefield of silence and stares. The kind where even the faintest cough felt like betrayal. Yandy's eyes darted for a fraction of a second, a glance sharp enough to pierce through the lens. It was the look of someone daring the cameras to immortalize the moment. Rasheeda's lips curled downward. Not quite a frown, not quite a grimace, but something in between. Something raw, exposed, and deeply human. The crew whispered in hushed tones behind the equipment. One muttered that the argument was spinning out of control. Another argued this was the gold they had been waiting for. The clash of ethics against entertainment vibrated through the air, and still, neither woman broke. The sound engineer's hands hovered nervously over the volume controls, ready to catch a scream or a microphone slam. The tension wasn't just visual, it was audible. The irregular rhythm of breathing, the sharp inhale before another verbal strike, a single laugh from Yandy sliced through the silence. It wasn't joy, it was mockery. It was a dagger disguised as sound. The crew flinched. Rasheeda froze, then Rasheeda's response came. Her tone low, her delivery surgical, a whisper louder than a scream. The cameras caught every syllable. A friend in the back gasped. Another placed a hand over their mouth, eyes wide, afraid to even exhale too loudly. The atmosphere grew unbearable. Sweat glistened under studio lights. The crew wiped brows nervously, yet refused to blink. One producer stepped forward, almost ready to call cut, but froze as another shook their head sharply. No one wanted to rob the world of this raw moment. No one wanted to stop the unraveling of something so volcanic. Every camera locked in. The tension had become cinematic. Yandy's smirk faltered for a split second. A tiny crack, a momentary fracture quickly buried under bravado. But the cameras saw it. The audience would see it. Nothing could hide from the lens. Rasheeda's shoulders rose and fell in slow rhythm, chest heaving as she controlled the fire within. That inhale and exhale said more than words could. It was survival. It was rage. The room tilted into chaos without a sound. The crew felt it. The friends felt it. Even the lights seemed to flicker with the weight of the clash. Someone in the corner whispered, "This is too much." Another whispered back, "This is everything." The duality of horror and fascination pulsed through everyone present. When Yandy leaned forward again, eyes gleaming with venom, a friend tried once more to speak. The words stuck in their throat. Fear of becoming collateral silenced them. Rasheeda's glare pinned Yandy in place. Her eyes, sharp as blades, didn't blink, didn't soften, didn't forgive. The camera drank it in greedily. Even the production assistants, usually shadows in the background, stood frozen. No one wanted to miss, no one dared to breathe wrong, no one dared to exist too loudly. The energy inside the room became contagious. It was no longer just Yandy versus Rasheeda. It was the weight of perception, the war of exposure, the collision of truth and performance. Micro-expressions became weapons. Subtle glances became declarations, and silence became the loudest sound of all. As the back and forth continued, the crew found themselves caught in its pull. Some secretly rooted for one side. Others shook their heads, whispering that lines had already been crossed. But no one looked away. The cameras rolled relentless. They captured twitching fingers gripping table edges. They captured eyes glistening under pressure. They captured rage masquerading as calm. By now, intervention felt impossible. The room belonged to the fire, and everyone was trapped inside it. And as the echoes of each word lingered in the thick air, one haunting truth remained. No one present would ever forget the silence, the stares and the reactions that told the story louder than words ever could. Louder than words ever could. The moment the word receipts entered the air, the tension in the room shifted instantly. Whispers stopped. Breath stalled. Eyes widened, Yandy reached slowly into her bag, the deliberate pace designed to build suspense. She pulled out her phone and held it like a weapon. The room exhaled in unison. Everyone knew what was coming. Her voice dropped low, each syllable echoing with intent. She said she was tired of accusations, tired of being painted as the villain. She claimed she had proof, screenshots, recordings,